Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Homebody Haven podcast. I am your host, Esprit, and this is a show all about love and at the root, self-love. So before we get into today's episode, I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way. Please make sure if you're watching on YouTube that you subscribe, comment, like, and engage with the post. It really helps a lot. And if you are listening, please make sure that you follow along as well. And if you are interested in exploring guided meditation and some journal and reflections, my 5 Channels of Awareness workbook is available online. It's a digital download, super easy to get through. You can get through the whole thing in 5 days, and it's wonderful. And you've got 6 guided meditations that you can keep forever. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching on the concept of self-love, self-abandonment, and returning back to yourself, you can find all of that information in the description as well as some other links to the Homebody Haven community where we have some more discussions and conversations. It's a 7-day free trial to join on that, and afterwards it is $50 for the entire year, and you get all of the content, access, direct messaging with myself, and like I said, deeper conversations on the episodes as they come out. So for today's episode, I wanted to talk about the concept of self-abandonment, and particularly in the way that one may monitor the way that they speak or the things that they say in order to keep the peace, or as not to rock the boat, or as not to burden other people with their emotions, their thoughts, or overwhelm, or being so cognizant of what other people are going through in their life that you act as if your problems or your thoughts or your experiences or your emotions are less important. Therefore, you should keep them to yourself and just try and fix it yourself. So I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with being mindful of other people's experiences and deciding whether or not to kind of trauma dump or express yourself or express a problem. I do think there's a level of self-reflection that you kind of have to take, or self-regulation, and take a step back and say, okay, what I'm going through, what's on my mind, is it something that I can at least regulate my thoughts and the sort of somatic or emotional experiences that are happening in my body before bringing it to the person that is involved in the conflict. But I do believe that a larger issue comes into play when you develop a pattern of speaking a certain way, speaking with a certain tone, speaking using certain language so that you can predict what the outcome will be and predict how their reaction will be, and if they're going to be receptive or if they're going to actually hear out what you have to say. And the reason why I think that this falls under the category of self-abandonment is because when you're monitoring the intensity in which you address conflict, you're not really being very honest with the person that you're addressing it with. And this is not just in romantic relationships. This is also amongst your friends. If they've done something that has been offensive or bothersome, this shows up at work when you're addressing conflict with a coworker or with a supervisor or somebody in management or someone in a higher position. Bringing an issue up is not a problem. Tone is important, right? You don't want to address someone by yelling or screaming or calling them out of their name or use of profane language, because most people are going to shut down. But when you try and say, okay, well, if I, the internal conversation of, if I maybe say it in a softer tone, or I use particular language, or I make sure that I address this at a time where they're not going through too much, then they'll be more receptive to hear it. And ultimately, people are going to be receptive to what you have to say because they're in a space of receptivity. Like, they're open to having a conversation that feels uncomfortable or difficult. They're open to repair. They're open to coming up with a solution that is viable for both people or for all parties involved. And if they're not, it really doesn't matter how you say it. In fact, it might cause more harm if you say it in this really curated way and they're already quite closed off, because they might feel like it's coming from a place of inauthenticity or fakeness in some way. And I I've been recently having this conversation with myself where I'm noticing that it is actually it's more of a sign of love and care when you just say how you're feeling, regardless of how someone could or may take it. You're withholding a level of truth and an opportunity for real connection with someone when you force the way that it's going to be understood. Does that make sense? when you say, okay, I'm going to withhold my full intense emotion because I don't want to make them uncomfortable, you're actually expressing a way lesser sign of love and care for that person. And you're kind of pre-assuming that they're not going to be able to handle the reality of a situation, and so you're going to dumb it down a little bit and make it easier to digest, which can be a little offensive because people can tell when you are adjusting the way that you speak as if they can't handle real conflict. And it's not to say that some people can't, right? There are people who cannot handle real conflict and they retreat when it's uncomfortable. But that is not your responsibility as the person bringing up an issue. If someone has an inability or a low capacity or low bandwidth for conflict and difficult conversations, that's something that they have to kind of manage and handle on their own. But you do have the right to say, I'm upset by something that you've done or by something that you've said or by the environment that's being created in this dynamic, and I think it needs to be addressed, and you voice whatever the specific problem is. And they have the choice to say, I don't want to address that. I don't want to give it time. I don't want to give it energy. I don't want to give it space, and I'm going to dip out. Or they can say, okay, I see where you're coming from. I feel uncomfortable, but let's talk about it. And that one of those two reactions at least is going to happen regardless of how you present the information. And I've been so guilty of this, and recently I've just been having more conversations with myself. I've been doing more affirmations in the mirror. I've been in therapy, and I've just been having more open dialogue and realizing, okay, you tend to censor yourself in order to make somebody else feel comfortable. But the reality is, I don't think it's actually been making people more comfortable. I think it's been painting this picture that my boundaries are loose and like I can be shifted or manipulated in some way, or that I'm actually being a little bit manipulative because I'm trying to create an outcome that feels favorable for both people without actually allowing them the opportunity to process the real problem that I'm having or the issue that I'm trying to address. And so it's this sticky line where you're trying to be considerate of people's feelings, but you're being more considerate of someone else's feelings before they've given you an opportunity to actually express what their feeling is. And you're also doing that, you're being more considerate of other people's feelings over your own. So you're not actually expressing the frustration or the pain or the annoyance or the dismissal that you might be feeling. Does that make sense? You're shifting a situation to lead to a favorable outcome without actually giving the conversation a real opportunity to play out how it should. And at least for myself, it never results in what I actually want. It always ends up in the greatest fear that I'm trying to avoid typically coming true. And then I have to deal with the emotions and consequences of that. And it's a process and a cycle that does not feel good at all. And I'll say for myself personally, it comes up more in romantic relationships, but there are people who have issues addressing stuff with their friends. There are people who have issues in their work environments. I've never had that issue, right? I've worked in reception and food and bev most frequently, And I don't really have a problem addressing a point of conflict with a client, or maybe a little lesser a coworker because I'm in closer quarters with them. But if something's happening and it's my job to address a financial issue or a scheduling issue or a behavior and retention issue with the client, I don't have an issue doing that. But for some reason, which I have a couple of theories, my romantic relationships, my relationships with men, it becomes increasingly more difficult to be like, I don't like that you just did that. I don't like it. I find myself forming sentences of, when you did this thing, I was thinking about it, and I'm not trying to control your actions or your thoughts or your behaviors, but I wasn't a huge fan of how, like, I just start rambling. And I'm sure other people can agree. You can pop it in the comments if you do. Where it depending on the situation, depending on the person that you're speaking to, what is the degree in which you are shifting your tone, shifting your language, silencing the intensity of a problem that you have, and it's not actually working out the way that you want. It's not actually keeping the peace. It's not actually avoiding conflict. It's not actually solving the problem. It's making the problem bigger. It is causing a different undertone of conflict and resentment and contempt, and giving it the environment to grow until it blows up, right? And you're not actually keeping the peace that way, because you're not giving peace an opportunity to authentically exist between yourself and another person or a group of people or just within a workspace. It becomes this sort of tiptoeing, walking on eggshells kind of feel. And that is such an anxiety-filled space. It does not create an air of peace. It is like very silent chaos, And so I want you to ask yourself, where have there been moments where you have just abandoned your feelings? You've abandoned your boundaries at the expense, or trying to create comfort for someone else at the expense of your own peace, and then labeling it as keeping the peace, or I don't do drama, or I'm trying to avoid conflict, or I just want things to be okay, so I'll handle it on my own. If that's been something you've experienced, I'd love to hear a moment or an example of that somewhere in the comments, and just sort of share. It's a safe space. It's a public space, but it's a safe space, I promise. Or you can join the Homebody Haven community if you want it to be a completely private conversation, completely up to you. But I have many an example. And it's, recent scenarios have forced me to really look at those moments and forgive myself. And I think that is honestly the biggest step towards self-love, and eliminating self-abandonment as like a default, is to constantly be in a state of forgiveness for yourself and apologize to yourself. Look in the mirror and say, I'm so sorry that I left you behind. I'm so sorry that I did not fully voice a feeling or a discomfort or a problem to the offender. Even if the offender didn't mean it, I've had to, especially recently, forgive myself for not speaking fully, not speaking with my chest, because I don't want to come off as aggressive or abrasive or as a part of the problem. But it doesn't solve the problem that wasn't really even a big problem to begin with. And if you are a fellow reformed or recovering people pleaser or peacekeeper, it is so much more beneficial for you, for the person that you're communicating with, for your nervous system, for your safety. And it is a true sign of love and care for someone for you to just say how you feel. I think it's better to just blurt out exactly how you're feeling, unfiltered, and then with that person be able to kind of backtrack and work through what the actual root issue is and what the root problem is and how to get to a real solution, versus trying to screenplay the whole conversation before it actually happens, so that you can say the best thing, or you can say the most clear thing, or the most comprehensive statement. And then you kind of have to go off script because they go off script from the story that you've already curated in your mind. It is so much better to just say fully and clearly how you are feeling. And there are so many moments that I wish that I could go back in time and replay a conversation or redo a point of conflict. And unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in, where we can just step back in time and say, this is actually what I meant to say, and I'm going to say it with my full chest, and I don't care what your response is. All we can do is, going forward, when we have conversations or interactions that feel familiar to those past situations, and address them differently. And that's what I haven't yet had the opportunity to do that. But I'm actually looking forward to having healthy conflict. I'm looking forward to having moments where I can fully express my thoughts and my feelings and boundaries, or something that I don't like, in a way that is so direct and clear, but isn't mean, isn't dismissive, isn't rude, but is from a place of realness, of a place of love, a place of, hey, I don't like what you just did. And especially if it's someone that I want to keep in my life, I want to keep you in my life, but I don't like what you just did. I don't like what you just said. I don't like how you positioned yourself in this situation, or how you expressed yourself. It made me feel uncomfortable, or it gave me an odd perception of you, and I just kind of want to explore that. I don't want to have to say, maybe you should consider saying what you just said a little differently, or, making these suggestions that no one asked for, but are also not creating a level of clarity in how I feel about the situation. It's something that I'm looking forward to, because I think it's something that you have to put into practice, especially if you've had this history of people pleasing, or monitoring your words, or adjusting your tone, or just not saying anything at all and just letting things kind of crumble to the side, or dismissing them, or letting doors kind of slowly shut. So yeah, I hope that this subject is something that people can sort of relate to and find themselves in, because I think that we abandon ourselves or silence our voices way more often than we may even realize. And in thinking outside in thinking outside of romantic relationships, but also in platonic relationships, dynamics with our parents, dynamics with siblings, dynamics with friends, or coworkers, or supervisors, or something like that. Where are the moments that you silence yourself, that you prevent yourself from really speaking from a place of truth, because you're worried of how it's going to be perceived, or how other people will feel, or if they'll feel burdened by your expression of an emotion or something that you're going through? Just think about that. Share it in the comments. I would love to interact a little bit more and talk about it. And I'm excited. This is episode 2. This is so fun. And I'm looking forward to having more of these conversations. Like I said before in episode 1, if there are any topics or subjects that you want to kind of ease into a little bit more, if there's some segment ideas that you're interested in, I'm an open vessel of suggestions for this, and I have some other things that I'm working on. So episode 3 should be really, really great. Third time's a charm. I think we're going to get our flow and find our vibe. That was probably very loud on the mic. Our vibe for this show as a community. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, however you are consuming this episode. I hope to see you in the next one. Please make sure that you subscribe and like and comment and interact with the video or the audio episode. And I will see you next week, Wednesday at 11. Yeah, have a great one. Bye.